Hello, my name is Aiden, and today I'm going to be talking about renewable energy projects and the continued colonization of the Sámi. At the turn of the 20th century, the Nordic countries began building large numbers of dams on the rivers of Sápmi for hydroelectric power. In recent years, wind farms and small hydropower (SHP) plants are increasingly being built in the region in an attempt to transition the Nordic countries towards being carbon neutral. These projects were created with minimal local input and have proven damaging to the Sámi. Renewable energy projects in Sápmi demonstrate the continued colonialism of the Nordic countries upon the Sámi people. Legitimate Sámi concerns over the environmental, cultural, and economic impacts of these projects are either brushed aside or completely ignored by the governments who instead value economic gain and exercising their own sovereignty over Sámi rights. Traditional Sámi economic and cultural activities, including fishing and reindeer herding, have been seriously damaged by these projects, with key breeding, pastoral, and migration land destroyed with limited compensation. Sámi-led protests and activism, such as the Alta Dam struggle, have significantly increased Sámi visibility, organization, and protections in the last 50 years, but their ability to block land use projects has been deliberately kept low by the national governments. The building of hydroelectric dams in Sápmi began in earnest at the beginning of the 20th century, with the Nordic countries' growing desire to develop and assert authority over their entire territory, as well as gain energy independence. Sweden, for instance, passed the Water Act in 1918, which allowed for the complete damming of rivers. Dams began to be built in Sápmi. Quote, the question of comfort and loss for nearby individuals was left to the estimation and interpretive privilege of the water courts, exploiters, and bailiffs, unquote. The local Sámi were given no agency or power over these projects, which were instead forced on the Sámi by the colonial authorities, with any concessions dictated by the latter. The direct damages caused by these dams on the Sámi, including loss of pasture, calving areas, migration routes, and fishing, were experienced in every country in Sápmi. These effects were further compounded by the growth of infrastructure to support these dams, such as roads, power lines, and railroads, which further fractured pastures. Although not the first instance of Sámi pushback against hydroelectric power, the Alta Dam conflict was the most visible and thrust the issue of Sámi rights into the political mainstream. Taking place in the region of Sápmi in Norway, the initial plans for the dam were drawn up in complete secrecy, purposely without any participation from the Sámi or other local residents, and the plans were not officially acknowledged until a Freedom of Information Act was passed in Norway in 1970. The initial plan called for a reservoir of 98 kilometers squared in size, which would have flooded two villages, including Masi, where 100% of the population spoke Sámi. Opposition began soon after from Sámi activists and their allies, including hunger strikes, lawsuits, and protest camps, peaking in the late 70s and early 80s. The plans were revised after the Masi River was designated a protected river, saving the village, and in conjunction with other revisions caused the final reservoir to be about 3 kilometers squared. However, the Norwegian government saw the project as a fight over their sovereignty and responded to the protest camps with, quote, the largest police mobilization in Norway since World War II, with 600 police, circa 10% of the national police force, moved into the Alta area, unquote. The dam was forced through and had the predicted devastating effects to reindeer migration and calving, as well as to salmon fishing, demonstrating the Norwegian government's continued brutal colonization of the Sámi and their lands. In the last 50 years, there's been an increase in official protections for the Sámi in Norway, Sweden, and Finland. In Norway between 1988 and 1990, and partially in response to the Alta Dam conflict, Sámi rights were enshrined to the Constitution, the Sámi Parliament was created, and ILO 169, the Convention Concerning Indigenous and Tribal Peoples in Independent Countries, was ratified. Finland has not ratified ILO 169, but according to researcher Soli Niersten-Harla, Finland, quote, has tried to meet the criteria of the convention whenever drafting legislation concerning the Sámi, unquote. In addition to the Sámi Parliament in Norway, there are also Sámi parliaments in Sweden and Finland. According to the latter country's Reindeer Herding Act, quote, the state is obliged to consult the reindeer herding cooperative in questions concerning land use matters that will have a substantial impact on the practice of reindeer herding, unquote. While in all three countries there are laws or constitutional amendments that call for consultation with the Sámi in regards to renewable energy projects or land use more generally, they are toothless with no provisions giving the Sámi veto power. In certain cases, however, where the Sámi constitute the majority of the population in a district, they can block land use projects through democratic control of the local government. Recently, the Nordic countries have turned more and more to wind energy for combating climate change, often at the expense of the Sámi and their reindeer herds. In Sweden, GPS tracking has backed up herders' claim that reindeer avoid areas with wind turbines either under construction or in use due to the noise, causing large areas of Sápmi to be effectively off limits to reindeer migrations, calving, and herding. In Finland, the diversion of migration routes caused by wind farms has resulted in increased traffic accidents, damage to agriculture, and accidental mixing of herds, all of which cause more work for the herders. The number of wind farms in the Nordic countries continues to multiply, with over 100 projects in various stages of development in Norway alone, as of 2021, according to Niersten Harla. Like the hydroelectric projects, the infrastructure built for these wind farms, such as roads and power lines, cause pasture fragmentation, reindeer deaths from accidents, and rerouted migrations. Additionally, the creation of more hydropower capacity has not stopped. There's been a proliferation of small hydropower, which are projects that produce less than 10 megawatts each, especially in Norway. The research of Sigrid Engen and her team have shown that between 2010 and 2018, 59% of SHP projects that were opposed by the Sámi were still granted permits by the Norwegian government, demonstrating that the latter still put economic gain over human rights, as well as highlighting the Sámi's lack of veto power. One of the most egregious breaches of Sámi rights is the Fosen wind farm project in Norway. The project was greenlit by the Petroleum and Energy Ministry in 2017 and consists of 273 wind turbines spread over the area around Trondheim, including traditional reindeer pasture. The 6 wind farms that make up the project were vigorously opposed by the Sámi, including the Sámi Parliament, as well as the UN Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, who wanted more time to examine Sámi complaints. Nevertheless, construction continued and the farms were commissioned in 2021. Later that same year, in a case brought forward by the Sámi, the Supreme Court of Norway ruled that the wind farms were illegal because they were in violation of Article 27 of the UN International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, which protects indigenous cultures and was incorporated into Norwegian law in 1999. However, it has been more than 2.5 years since the decision, and the Norwegian government has still done nothing, and the wind farms continue in operation without any reparations for the Sámi, in violation of both Norwegian and international law. Starting with the first hydroelectric dams in the region in the early 20th century and continuing on into the present with projects like the Alta Dam and the Fosen wind farms, the governments of Norway, Sweden, and Finland demonstrate that their colonization of the Sámi people persists today. Although more protections for the Sámi have been created on paper, such as the creation of Sámi parliaments, laws protecting Sámi rights, and international conventions protecting indigenous peoples, these provisions deliberately lack enforceability and are regularly ignored by the respective governments. Until the Sámi are given veto power over renewable energy and other projects in Sápmi, there will never be complete justice for the Sámi, and colonization will continue at the hands of the national governments. Here are the sources and links to the images I used in this presentation. Thank you for listening.